The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Terra as Amy Torres pressed her face against the classroom window. The 8-year-old girl watched the golden stalks sway in the breeze, thinking about the picnic her family had planned for the weekend. Behind her, teacher Robert Kane explained fractions to the 23 children in his care. His voice calm and patient as always. New Terra had been humanity's success story for 15 years. The colony world offered rich soil, clean water, and endless opportunities for families seeking a fresh start. 50,000 humans called this place home, building farms, schools, and communities under the alien stars. The children here knew no other world, playing in fields that stretched to the horizon and swimming in rivers that ran crystal clear above the peaceful scene. Something moved in the morning sky. Amy squinted at the dark shapes descending through. The clouds, too large to be the supply ships that visited monthly. These vessels moved with purpose, their hulls gleaming like black metal against the blue atmosphere. She tugged on her friend's sleeve. Pointing upward with growing concern, Commander Thane stood in the control center of his flagship, studying the human settlement through advanced sensors. The Vortaki officer towered 8 feet tall, his insectoid, features arranged in what passed for satisfaction among his species. His 4 arms moved across control panels with practiced efficiency, coordinating the fleet's approach to their target, the Vortaki. Empire had conquered 47 worlds using the same proven strategy. Identify the weakest members of the target species, capture them, and use them as leverage to force total surrender. Their analysts had studied humanity for months, noting their emotional attachments and irrational protective behaviors. The humans appeared physically weak compared to other species they had encountered, relying on primitive tools and simple technology. "Begin the descent," Thane commanded, his translated voice echoing through the ship's corridors. "Target, educational facilities as planned. Capture the young ones first." The ground shook beneath the school as the first Vortaki dropship touched down in the playground. Children screamed and scattered as the massive vessel crushed swing sets and climbing equipment under its weight. Robert Kane rushed to the windows, his face pale as he watched more ships landing across the settlement. Emergency alarms began, wailing throughout the colony. "Everyone away from the windows," Kane shouted, herding his students toward the back of the classroom. "We need to get to the shelter now." Amy clutched her friend's hand as they ran through the hallways. Other teachers were doing the same, guiding hundreds of children toward the underground bunkers built for emergencies. The sound of energy weapons echoed from outside, followed by human screams and alien voices speaking in harsh, clicking languages. The Vortaki soldiers emerged from their ships like nightmares given form. Their exoskeletons gleamed with built-in armor, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat, expecting the same quick surrender they had received on dozens of other worlds. What they found instead surprised them. Human adults threw themselves between the aliens and the fleeing children with shocking disregard for their own safety. Farm Supervisor Mike Chun grabbed a shovel and charged a Vortaki soldier, knowing his primitive weapon stood no chance against alien technology. He died in seconds, but his sacrifice bought precious time for 12 children to reach safety. School principal Janet Walsh barricaded herself in her office, frantically calling for help on every communication channel she could access. Her words went out to every adult in the colony, painting a picture of invasion and terror that ignited something primal in the human heart. "They're taking our children," she screamed into her transmitter before an energy blast cut her transmission. Short, the Vortaki had studied human behavior extensively, but they had misunderstood what they observed. They saw emotional attachment where they should have recognized evolutionary programming. They saw weakness where they should have seen humanity's greatest strength. Every human adult who heard those words felt something ancient and terrible. Wake up inside them. Teacher Robert Kane made his last stand in the school's main hallway, facing down 3 Vortaki soldiers with nothing but a fire extinguisher. He died protecting 17 children who escaped through the emergency exits, but his actions would be remembered in the days to come. The children who survived would tell their parents how Mr. Kane smiled at them one last time before turning to face the monsters. By noon, the Vortaki had succeeded in their primary objective. 200 human children sat in energy cages aboard their command ship, confused and terrified but alive. Commander Thane reviewed the casualty reports with satisfaction. 37 adult humans had died in the operation, a higher number than usual but still acceptable. The primitive species had fought harder than expected, but the result was the same. The children huddled together in their prison, trying to comfort each other as their world fell apart. Amy Torres held the hand of a boy named Tim Foster, whose parents had been killed defending the school. The 12-year-old's eyes showed no tears, only a cold determination that would have worried the aliens if they had bothered to notice. "We'll get out of here," Tim whispered to the younger children. "Our parents will come for us." Commander Thane prepared his victory transmission to the human leadership, confident that surrender would follow within hours. His species had perfected this technique over centuries of conquest. No rational being would sacrifice an entire population for the sake of their young, especially when cooperation offered a path to survival. What Thane didn't understand was that humans were not rational when their children were threatened. Evolution had hardwired something into the human psyche that the Vortaki had never encountered in their previous conquests. The commander was about to learn that some instincts were more powerful than logic, and some bonds were stronger than the fear of death. The message that went out to every human adult on New Terra was simple and devastating. Their children were gone, taken by monsters from the stars. The aliens expected surrender, but they had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They had awakened something that would haunt their species for generations to come. The hunt was about to begin. The emergency broadcast crackled through every speaker in New Terra, carrying Colonial Administrator Beth Rivera's voice to 50,000 human ears. Her words cut through the chaos of the morning's attack with crystal clarity, transforming grief into something far more dangerous. "Citizens of New Terra," Rivera's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, "the alien forces have taken our children. I declare martial law effective immediately. All civilian activities are suspended. Every adult will report to their sector commanders for military assignment. No terms with the invaders, no negotiations, no surrender. We hunt them down." Tom Bradley dropped his engineering tools and stared at the workshop radio. The 45-year-old had spent his life building irrigation systems and repairing farm equipment. He had not touched a weapon since his mandatory service 20 years ago. Now he felt his hands steady as he reached for the plasma cutter, his mind already adapting the tool for a different purpose. Across the colony, similar transformations were taking place. Dana Walsh, the former security chief who had retired to raise vegetables, found herself surrounded by farmers and shopkeepers demanding weapons and assignments. Her peaceful greenhouse became a war room as civilians evolved into soldiers before her eyes. "Listen carefully," Walsh addressed the crowd gathering in the town square. "These aliens think they understand us. They took our children because they believe we'll break. They're about to learn what humans do when someone threatens our young." The Vortaki had made their first critical error in analyzing human psychology. They had observed parental protection as an individual response, failing to recognize it as a species-wide trigger. Every human adult on New Terra, whether they had children or not, felt the same primal rage building in their chest. The aliens had not just attacked families, they had attacked the future of humanity itself. Commander Thane received his first disturbing reports 12 hours after the initial assault. A routine patrol of 6 Vortaki soldiers had vanished near the mining district. Their last transmission mentioned human civilians approaching with what appeared to be mining equipment. The aliens had dismissed the threat, reporting that primitive tools posed no danger to their advanced armor. The patrol was found 6 hours later, their bodies torn apart by industrial lasers and shaped explosive charges. The humans had used their mining expertise to create weapons that could penetrate Vortaki defenses. More disturbing was the precision of the attack, suggesting coordination that exceeded the aliens' expectations for a primitive species. Dr. Lisa, Chun crouched in the ruins of the research station, her xenobiology training suddenly invaluable, in ways she had never imagined. She studied the energy patterns of captured Vortaki equipment, searching for weaknesses in their technology. Her scientific mind cataloged every detail that might help her people fight back. Their communication system operates on rotating frequencies, she explained to a group of volunteers. If we can build jammers using our agricultural sensors, we can blind them to each other's positions. The children aboard the Vortaki command ship felt the ship shudder as something impacted the hull. Tim Foster pressed his face against the energy barrier of their cage, watching alien soldiers run through the corridors with obvious urgency. The boy's parents were dead, killed defending his school, but his grief had crystallized into something harder than diamond. "They're scared," he whispered to Amy Torres. "Listen to how they're talking." The other children strained to hear the clicking and chittering of Vortaki speech. Even without understanding the words, they could detect the rising panic in their captors' voices. The aliens were facing something they had not expected, and their confidence was cracking. Back on the surface, the human resistance had evolved beyond simple revenge. Pete Morgan, a 70-year-old grandfather, led a team of elderly colonists in creating improvised explosives from farming chemicals. His hands shook with age, but his mind remained sharp as he calculated blast patterns and timing mechanisms. "We may be old," he told his companions, "but we've got 60 years of experience solving problems. These bugs are just another problem to solve." The Vortaki discovered that humans fought differently than any species they had encountered. Other conquered peoples had formed organized militaries with clear command structures and logical objectives. The humans seemed to operate as a single organism, with every individual understanding their role without formal coordination. Commander Thane studied the tactical reports with growing concern. Human attacks were becoming more sophisticated by the hour, as if the entire population was learning and adapting in real time. Their weapons were crude but effective, their tactics unpredictable, and their commitment absolute. "They show no concern for their own casualties," reported Subcommander Crix. "They attack our positions with complete disregard for survival. This behavior does not match any known species profile." The humans had discovered something about themselves during those first 12 hours of war. Ordinary people found reserves of courage and cunning they never knew they possessed. The colony's children were not just a responsibility, they were the future of humanity itself. Protecting them was not a choice, but a biological imperative written into every human cell. Engineer Tom Bradley emerged from his workshop carrying a device that hummed with deadly energy. He had converted a mining laser into a weapon that could penetrate Vortaki armor, and his modifications were already being copied by other survivors. The aliens' technological advantage was evaporating as human ingenuity found ways to level the playing field. "Remember," Bradley told the group of volunteers gathering around him, "we're not trying to win a war. We're trying to get our children back. Everything else is secondary." The Vortaki had expected a species that would weigh costs and benefits, making rational decisions about acceptable losses. Instead, they faced humans who had made a simple calculation: the aliens had to die, regardless of the price. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no negotiation. The invaders had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. As night fell over New Terra, the hunt continued. Human voices echoed through the darkness, coordinating attacks and sharing intelligence. The aliens found themselves trapped in a nightmare where every shadow might hide death, and every human face showed the same terrifying determination. Commander Thane began to suspect that his species had made a fundamental error. The humans were not fighting like conquered subjects or desperate survivors. They were fighting like apex predators defending their den, and the Vortaki were discovering they were not the dominant species they had believed themselves to be. The children in their cages felt the ship shake again, stronger this time. Tim Foster smiled grimly as he watched alien soldiers running past their prison. His parents were dead, but they had taught him something important before they died. Nobody messes with human kids and lives to tell about it. The stolen Vortaki communication device crackled to life in Dr. Lisa Chun's makeshift laboratory, filling the underground bunker with alien voices speaking in rapid, agitated clicks. She had spent 36 hours without sleep, driven by the knowledge that 200 human children were counting on her to crack the invaders' technology. They're reporting massive casualties in Sector 7. Chun, translated for the resistance leaders gathered around her improvised workstation. Their ground commander is requesting immediate reinforcements. The xenobiologist's fingers flew across her tablet as she decoded more transmissions. What she discovered sent chills through her exhausted mind. The Vortaki were not just suffering losses. They were experiencing something their species had never encountered in centuries of conquest. They were afraid. Tom Bradley wiped alien blood from his improvised weapon, surveying the wreckage of what had once been a Vortaki patrol. His engineering background had allowed him to create devices that turned the aliens' own technology against them. The plasma cutter in his hands now fired concentrated bursts that could melt through their armor like butter. "Third patrol this hour," he reported to Dana Walsh through their hijacked communication system. "They're not adapting to our tactics. They keep sending the same formation into the same trap." Walsh acknowledged the report from her position in the grain silo that had become their command center. The former security chief had transformed overnight from a peaceful farmer into a strategic mastermind, coordinating attacks across the entire colony with ruthless efficiency. "Their psychology is wrong," she muttered, studying the pattern of Vortaki movements on her tactical display. "They're not learning from their mistakes because they can't accept that we're outsmarting them." The truth was becoming clear to the human defenders. The Vortaki Empire had conquered dozens of worlds using the same strategy, facing species that fought according to predictable patterns. They had never encountered a species that could adapt and evolve their tactics in real time, driven by an emotional intensity that transcended rational thought. Aboard the command ship, 12-year-old Tim Foster had become the unofficial leader of the captured children. His parents' death had awakened something cold and calculating in the boy's mind, a premature maturity that allowed him to see opportunities where others saw only despair. "The guards change shift every 6 hours," he whispered to Amy Torres and the other children gathered around him. "They always leave the same gap in their patrol pattern. If we can short-circuit the cage controls during that window, we can get out." Amy looked at her friend with new respect. Tim had been quiet and studious before the invasion, but losing his parents had transformed him into something harder. The 8-year-old girl felt the same change happening inside herself. Childhood innocence replaced by a determination that scared her. "What do we do once we're out?" she asked. Tim's smile was entirely too adult for his young face. "We help our parents. Kill every alien on this ship." The children had been watching their captors carefully, noting weaknesses and patterns that adult prisoners might have missed. Their young minds processed information differently, seeing possibilities where experience might have shown only obstacles. The Vortaki had assumed human children were helpless, but they were about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating any human. When their family was threatened, Commander Thane stared at the tactical display in his command center, watching. Red indicators spread across the colony map like a plague. Each marker represented a failed patrol, a destroyed outpost, or a communication relay that had gone silent. His forces were being systematically eliminated by an enemy that should have been cowering in surrender. "Status report," he demanded, his forearms clicking nervously against his command console. Sub-Commander Crix approached with obvious reluctance. "We have lost 60% of our ground forces. The humans are using coordinated attacks that suggest species-wide communication beyond our ability to intercept. Their weapons are becoming more sophisticated by the hour." The report confirmed Thane's worst fears. The Vortaki had encountered something outside their understanding of how species should behave. The humans were not just fighting, they were evolving into something more dangerous with each passing hour. "What about the hostages?" Thane asked. "Are they still secure?" Crix hesitated before responding. "The young ones are contained, but they show no signs of the psychological breakdown we expected. If anything, they appear to be organizing themselves." Dr. Chun's translation work had revealed something that chilled the human defenders to their core. The Vortaki had used this exact strategy on 47 other worlds, and it had worked perfectly every time. They would capture the young, the old, or the weak, then use them as leverage to force total surrender from the rest of the population. "They've done this before," Sean explained to the assembled resistance leaders. "Dozens of species have fallen to this exact tactic. The difference is that those species made rational calculations about acceptable losses," Walsh nodded grimly. "We're not being rational, we're being human." The distinction was crucial. Other species might weigh the survival of their civilization against the lives of their captured young. Humans had made a different calculation entirely. There was no civilization worth preserving if it meant abandoning their children to monsters. Pete Morgan's improvised explosives had turned the mining district into a death trap for Vortaki patrols. The elderly grandfather worked with the precision of a master craftsman, creating devices that could bring down alien aircraft or collapse tunnel systems at precisely the right moment. "Funny thing about being old," he told his companions as they prepared another ambush. "You stop worrying about consequences and start focusing on results." The human attacks were becoming more coordinated and more brutal. The colonists had discovered that Vortaki soldiers were individually superior in combat, but they panicked when isolated from their units. Human tactics began to focus on separating alien forces and eliminating them one by one. Tom Bradley's weapon modifications were being copied throughout the colony, turning every farmer and mechanic into a deadly opponent. The aliens' technological advantage was evaporating as human ingenuity found ways to level the playing field. "They're not warriors," Bradley realized as he watched another Vortaki patrol flee from a group of armed farmers. "They're conquerors. They've never faced real resistance before." The children aboard the command ship felt the vessel shudder again as something large impacted the hull. Tim Foster smiled as he watched alien soldiers run past their prison, their movements betraying panic and confusion. The boy had been studying the ship's layout, memorizing every corridor and junction for the moment when they would be free. "Mom and Dad are coming," he whispered to himself, though he knew his parents were dead. "All of them are coming." The human species had awakened something primal and terrible in response to the threat against their young. The Vortaki had expected to face a broken and desperate enemy, but instead they found themselves hunted by something they had never encountered before. Commander Thane's empire was about to learn that some bonds could not be broken by force, and some instincts were more powerful than fear. The humans were coming for their children, and nothing in the universe would stop them. The hunt was entering its final phase. The hull of the Vortaki command ship groaned under the impact of human-made explosives as Captain Rita Santos led her assault team through the breach. The former military officer had spent 5 years in retirement, teaching colonial children how to swim in the crystal rivers of New Terra. Now she moved through alien corridors with deadly purpose, her improvised weapons cutting down anything that stood between her and the captured children. "Breach successful," she reported through the hijacked communication system. "We're inside the primary vessel. Beginning search for the hostages." Behind her, 23 colonists followed with the focused intensity of parents hunting the monsters who had stolen their future. Tom Bradley carried his modified plasma cutter, while Pete Morgan clutched explosives that could collapse entire sections of the ship. Dr. Chun had insisted on joining the mission, her knowledge of alien technology crucial to navigating the vessel's systems. The Vortaki defenders discovered that humans in enclosed spaces fought with a ferocity that their combat algorithms could not predict or counter. The colonists moved through the ship like a tide of destruction, showing no concern for their own safety as they carved a path toward their children. Commander Thane watched his forces collapse from the bridge of his flagship, finally understanding the magnitude of his miscalculation. The humans were not fighting like any species his empire had encountered. They were fighting like a force of nature, unstoppable and utterly without mercy. "Evacuate the surface forces," he ordered Sub-Commander Crix. "We retreat to orbit and bombard the planet from space." Crix hesitated before responding. Commander, the human assault teams have breached our hull in 17 locations. They are already aboard our ships. Orbital bombardment would destroy our own forces. The situation had become a nightmare beyond Thane's worst projections. The primitive humans had somehow managed to board his technologically superior vessels and were systematically hunting down his soldiers. More disturbing was their apparent lack of fear, as if death meant nothing compared to reaching their captured young. Tim Foster felt the energy cage flicker as the ship's power systems fluctuated under the human assault. The 12-year-old boy had spent 3 days studying the alien technology, waiting for exactly this moment. His small hands worked with surprising skill, using techniques Dr. Chun had taught him in xenobiology class to short-circuit the containment field. Now, he whispered to Amy Torres and the other children, everyone out quietly. The 200 human children moved with the coordination of a military unit, their young minds having adapted to captivity with frightening efficiency. They had not spent their imprisonment crying or breaking down, but planning and preparing for this moment. The Vortaki had expected human young to be helpless, but they were about to discover their error. Captain Santos encountered her first group of Vortaki soldiers in the ship's main corridor. The 8-foot-tall insectoids moved with the confidence of a superior species, their energy weapons humming with deadly power. They expected the human female to retreat or surrender in the face of their obvious technological advantage. Instead, Santos smiled and triggered the mining charges that Pete Morgan had placed throughout the corridor. The explosion shattered the aliens' energy shields and sent them tumbling into the walls. Before they could recover, the human assault team was upon them with improvised weapons and absolute determination. Remember, Santos told her team as they stepped over the alien bodies, we're not here to take prisoners. We're here to get our children back. The Vortaki had never encountered a species that could transform grief into such focused violence. Every human adult on the assault team had lost someone to the alien invasion, and their pain had crystallized into something harder than steel. They moved through the ship with the efficiency of predators, showing no mercy to anything that threatened their young. Dr. Chun crouched over a fallen Vortaki communication device, her fingers flying as she accessed the alien database. What she found confirmed her worst fears and greatest hopes. The Vortaki Empire had detailed records of 47 successful conquests, each following the same pattern of hostage-taking and forced surrender. They've never failed before, reported to Santos. Every species they've encountered has made the rational choice to preserve their civilization by sacrificing their young. Santos nodded grimly as she reloaded her weapon. Then they picked the wrong species to mess with. The human children had scattered throughout the ship, their small size allowing them to access areas that adult prisoners could never reach. Tim Foster found himself in what appeared to be the ship's main computer center, surrounded by alien technology that hummed with power. The boy's xenobiology training had taught him to recognize energy patterns, and he could see obvious weaknesses. In the ship's design, Amy, he called softly to his friend, help me with this. The 8-year-old girl joined him at the central console, her small hands working alongside his to disable the ship's defense systems. Neither child fully understood what they were doing, but they had watched Dr. Chun work with similar devices and remembered the patterns she had shown them throughout the ship. Other children were conducting their own acts of sabotage. They disabled life support systems, jammed communication arrays, and opened airlocks that sucked Vortaki soldiers into the vacuum of space. The aliens had assumed human young were helpless, but they were discovering that even children became dangerous when their families were threatened. Commander Thane felt his flagship shudder as critical systems failed throughout the vessel. The bridge lights flickered and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. His technicians reported system failures cascading through every level of the ship. The humans are inside our computer core, one of them reported in panic. They're systematically destroying our infrastructure. Thane looked at the security displays showing human adults and children working together to tear his ship apart from within. The adults fought with the skill of experienced soldiers, while the children moved through the vessel like ghosts, appearing wherever they were least expected. "This is impossible," he muttered. The young ones were secured in energy cages. "Sub-Commander." Crick's approached with obvious reluctance. "Commander, the human young appear to have disabled their own containment systems. They are now actively participating in the assault on our vessel." The revelation struck Thane like a physical blow. His species had assumed that young humans would be paralyzed by fear and separation from their parents. Instead, they had become additional weapons in humanity's arsenal, their youth making them unpredictable and dangerous in ways adult prisoners never could be. Captain Santos reached the ship's bridge just as the last of the Vortaki command staff fell to her team's weapons. The human officer looked around at the alien technology with grim satisfaction, knowing that her people had achieved something impossible. They had not just rescued their children, they had conquered their captors. "All teams, this is Santos." She broadcast through the ship's communication system. "The command vessel is secure. Begin evacuation of all human civilians." The children came running from every corner of the ship, their faces showing the same cold determination that had driven their parents to this moment. Tim Foster embraced Captain Santos with tears in his eyes, but his voice remained steady as he reported on their sabotage efforts. "We disabled their engines, communications, and life support," he said. "The other ships in their fleet are cut off from command." Santos looked at the boy with new respect. The 12-year-old had lost his parents defending his school, but he had found a way to honor their sacrifice. The human species had not just survived the Vortaki invasion. They had shown the galaxy what happened when someone threatened their young commander. Thane sent his final transmission to the Vortaki fleet. As his flagship died around him, the message was simple, but would echo through the Empire for generations to come. Do not engage humans protecting their offspring. Classification: extinction level threat. The galaxy was about to learn that some bonds were stronger than technology, and some instincts were more powerful than fear. The Vortaki had learned too late that human children were not weaknesses to be exploited, but the future of a species that would fight impossible odds to protect them. The reckoning was complete. The Vortaki High Command Chamber fell silent as Commander Thane's final transmission ended, leaving 47 military leaders staring at displays filled with tactical data that defied their understanding of warfare. The humans of New Terra had not just repelled an invasion, they had demonstrated something that challenged everything the Empire believed about conquest and species hierarchy. General Vorth, Supreme Commander of the Vortaki forces, studied the battle recordings with growing unease. His species had built their empire on the foundation of predictable responses from conquered peoples. The humans had shattered that foundation with behavior that seemed to violate the basic laws of survival. "Analysis complete," reported the Empire's chief strategist. The human response exceeded all projected parameters. They sustained 43% casualties while inflicting 97% losses on our forces. This ratio is unprecedented in our conquest history. The numbers told only part of the story. The recordings showed humans fighting with a coordination that suggested species-wide communication beyond Vortaki ability to intercept. More disturbing was their apparent disregard for personal survival when defending their young, transforming ordinary colonists into weapons of terrifying efficiency. On New Terra, the morning sun rose over a colony transformed by war. The wheat fields were scarred by weapons fire, and the schools lay in ruins, but the human spirit had emerged stronger than ever. 200 children played in the settlement's central square, their laughter echoing off buildings that bore the marks of alien attack. Dr. Lisa Chun sat in her rebuilt laboratory, studying the vast database of Vortaki technology and intelligence they had captured. What she discovered painted a picture of systematic conquest spanning centuries, with dozens of species falling to the same hostage-taking strategy that had failed so catastrophically against humanity. "They documented everything," she explained to Colonial Administrator Beth Rivera. "Every world they conquered, every species they subjugated. The pattern is always the same. capture the most vulnerable population, use them as leverage, force surrender. Rivera nodded as she reviewed the alien records. And it worked every time until they met us. The difference was becoming clear as they analyzed the Vortaki files. Other species had made rational calculations about acceptable losses, weighing the survival of their civilization against the lives of their captured young. Humans had made a different calculation entirely, one that transcended logic and entered the realm of biological imperative. Tim Foster walked through the memorial garden that had been built where his school once stood. The 12-year-old boy carried flowers for his parents' graves, his young face showing the premature maturity that had made him a leader among the captured children. His parents had died defending him, but their sacrifice had awakened something in humanity that would echo through the galaxy. "They're proud of you," Amy Torres said, joining her friend at the memorial. The 8-year-old girl had lost her uncle in the fighting, but she had gained an understanding of what it meant to be human that no alien species could comprehend. The children of New Terra had become something unique in the galaxy, a generation that knew from personal experience that their community would fight impossible odds to protect them. They carried that knowledge like armor, confident in their place in a universe that had tried to take them from their families. Sub-Commander Crix stood in the Vortaki detention facility, the sole survivor of the New Terra invasion. The insectoid officer had requested to remain on the human world rather than return to his empire, claiming that his species needed to understand what they had encountered. His captors treated him well, but he remained a constant reminder of the price of threatening human children. "Your species fascinates me," he told Dr. Chun during one of their regular conversations. "You fight like no other we have encountered. You transform grief into strength, fear into fury. It is both beautiful and terrifying." Chun studied the alien officer with scientific interest. "What will your empire do now that they know about U.S.?" Crix's compound eyes reflected something that might have been respect. "They will update their conquest protocols. Humanity will be classified as unsuitable for standard invasion techniques. Your children will be marked as absolutely forbidden targets." The Vortaki Empire was indeed changing its approach to humanity. The battle recordings from New Terra had been distributed to every military command in the galaxy, serving as a warning about the dangers of underestimating human protective instincts. The species that had seemed primitive and emotional was being reclassified as something far more dangerous. Captain Rita Santos stood in the New Terra Command Center, now serving as the colony's military coordinator. The former swimming instructor had discovered talents she never knew she possessed, becoming a strategic leader who could coordinate complex operations with deadly efficiency. Her transformation from teacher to warrior embodied humanity's response to the threat against their young. "The galaxy needs to understand," she told the assembled council. "We're not aggressive by nature, but we become something else when our children are threatened. Every species needs to know that line exists." The human colonies throughout the galaxy were sharing the story of New Terra, ensuring that every spacefaring species understood the consequences of targeting human children. The message was simple but profound. Humanity would tolerate many things, but threatening their young was a line that could never be crossed. Engineer Tom Bradley had returned to his workshop, but his work now focused on defensive systems rather than irrigation equipment. His modifications to mining tools had proven that human ingenuity could overcome technological disadvantages when properly motivated. The colony's children stopped by his workshop daily, learning skills that might protect them in a hostile universe. "Remember," he told Amy Torres as she practiced with a modified plasma cutter, "we're not teaching you to be soldiers. We're teaching you to be survivors. There's a difference." The children nodded seriously, understanding that their education had expanded beyond traditional subjects. They were learning to live in a galaxy where their species had gained both respect and fear through their parents' actions. The universe now knew that human children were protected by something more powerful than weapons or technology. Dr. Chun's final report to the Colonial Council summarized the lessons of the invasion in terms that would be shared throughout human space. The Vortaki had chosen their target based on flawed assumptions about human psychology, triggering a response that had surprised both species. "We learned something about ourselves," she concluded. "When our children are threatened, we become something beyond rational calculation. We become a force of nature that cannot be stopped or reasoned with. The galaxy now knows this truth." The Vortaki Empire updated their star charts with a new classification system, marking all human colonies with warnings that would persist for generations. The notation was simple but absolute. Species classification, protected. Do not engage. Civilian populations. Do not threaten offspring. Standard conquest protocols ineffective. Recommend complete avoidance. Word of New Terra spread through the galactic community like wildfire, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees from the Vortaki Empire. The story became legend among spacefaring species, a cautionary tale about the dangers of misunderstanding human nature. Other empires quietly removed humanity from their target lists, recognizing that some species were too dangerous to provoke. The children of New Terra grew up knowing they were part of something larger than themselves. They had witnessed their community transform from peaceful farmers into unstoppable warriors when their safety was threatened. That knowledge shaped them into confident young people who understood their place in a universe that had learned to respect human protective instincts. Pete Morgan, the elderly grandfather who had created improvised explosives from farming chemicals, became something of a celebrity among the colonists. His workshop was always filled with young people eager to learn from someone who had helped drive off an alien invasion. He taught them practical skills, but also something more important, that age and experience were weapons that could not be taken away. "The aliens thought we were weak because we were emotional," he told his students. "They didn't understand that emotions can make you stronger than any technology. When someone threatens your family, you find strength you never knew you had." The memorial garden expanded as the colony rebuilt, honoring not just those who had died, but those who had survived to tell the story. Every child who visited learned the names of the adults who had sacrificed themselves to protect the young. The lesson was clear. Human civilization was built on the foundation of people willing to die for the next generation. Sub-Commander Crix eventually returned to the Vortaki Empire, carrying with him a complete understanding of what his species had encountered. His reports became required reading for every military officer in the Empire, serving as a reminder that technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy motivated by something deeper than logic. "The humans fight for their young with the intensity of a dying star," he wrote in his final assessment. "They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be stopped once that instinct is triggered. Any empire that threatens human children will face extinction." The galaxy's balance of power shifted subtly as other species absorbed the lessons of New Terra. Humanity was no longer seen as a minor player on the galactic stage, but as a species capable of extreme violence when properly motivated. The peaceful farmers and colonists had revealed themselves to be apex predators in disguise, waiting for the right trigger to unleash their true nature. Dr. Chun's xenobiology research took on new significance as other species sought to understand human psychology. Her work became the foundation for diplomatic protocols that recognized humanity's unique protective instincts. The scientific community marveled at a species that could transform ordinary civilians into weapons of war through emotional bonds. Alone, the children who had been captured and rescued became symbols of humanity's strength throughout the galaxy. Tim Foster, Amy Torres, and their companions grew up knowing that their suffering had served a purpose, teaching the universe that human children were under the protection of something far more dangerous than any military force. Years later, when Tim Foster joined the Colonial Defense Force, he carried with him the memory of watching his parents die to protect him. That memory drove him to become one of humanity's most effective military leaders, but more importantly, it reminded him why humans fought. They did not fight for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to protect their young. The warning that went out from New Terra echoed through the galaxy for generations to come. Every spacefaring species learned the same lesson that had cost the Vortaki Empire so dearly. Humans could be negotiated with, traded with, even fought against under the right circumstances. But threatening their children was a line that could never be crossed. The galaxy had learned to fear the sound of human voices raised in defense of their young, and that fear kept the peace for decades to come. The Vortaki had realized too late that some bonds were stronger than technology, some instincts more powerful than logic, and some species too dangerous to provoke when protecting what they loved most. The children of New Terra played in fields of grain that grew over the graves of alien invaders, their laughter a reminder that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their absolute refusal to abandon their young to monsters from the stars.